Hello, welcome to my stream. Um, I chat about. My name is Nathan Hatch. I chat about health stuff. If you'd like to know about dopamine and dopamine detox trends, that's what we're going to talk about mainly today. What I do is I chat about a topic, and then viewers ask me questions about their health. So if you'd like to participate, if you're listening to the VOD and you'd like to participate in future streams, make sure to follow so you get notified. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Nathan Guy Hatch. Right now, I give people some time to trickle in. Oh, hey, Melinda. Nice to see you. Welcome. I give people a few minutes to trickle in before we really start the stream, usually about 10 minutes. So if you are watching the VOD, you can skip ahead if you like. We sometimes banter at first, though. Yeah, you are. Hey, Melinda, how are you doing? Did your week go all right? I know I actually talked to you just a few days ago, but hey, Wonder Bunny. Yeah, me too. Actually, somebody that I was coaching brought this to my attention. Oddly enough, I didn't really know that this was a thing. I saw an article a while ago with some. Oh, Melinda, that's really great. Hey, Jay. Oh yeah, Jay. Which one was that? I know there's a lot, and a lot of them are really long. Yeah, Melinda, that's real convenient. I'm actually drinking some hibiscus right now. It's so good. If you guys are wondering what we're talking about, hibiscus is a really great source of anthocyanin, which are the purple, blue, and red colors in things like berries, and hibiscus is a good source of that. And I talk about anthocyanins in my book a bit, and how they're really important for health things. Yeah, it's really delicious. If you guys have read my book, I talk about anthocyanins and how important they are. Oh yeah, the endocrine. Or no, sorry, endometriosis, the endometriosis and PCOS stream. Or there's also a stream on the endocrine system, and where I talk about how the endocrine system affects your political ideology. People with deranged endocrine systems tend to be more agitated and fearful, kind of thing. Or the endometriosis one is about reproductive health, women's reproductive health. Yeah, so hibiscus is delicious, and it can be a more convenient source of anthocyanins than berries, because like berries, very often they don't keep very long. They're very expensive sometimes. And there's also a lot of products on the market. Like if you ever buy like like for instance pomegranate juice in the United States, it's mostly apple juice, and it's just colored with pomegranate juice. It's fucking bullshit. But yeah. Oh, thanks, Wonder. Yeah. I think for some people, like YouTube, is mostly an entertainment medium. There's a lot of really great edutainment where people they're really great. Like I was telling somebody about like one of the channels I like is Sam Manella Academy. It's spelled Sam Onella, and he talks about like history stuff, and he's really ridiculous and funny. And I'm not really entertaining. I want to produce like actual videos in the future, but that takes a bit. I'm not really a very good editor, and to script them and put them together and stuff, it's just beyond my capability right now. So hopefully in the future, like if I sell more books and get more support, then I can start producing more slick content to explain these things. But for now, just doing like a podcast works, and it's good supplemental content for all of you that read my work and support it. So and it's a fun opportunity to get to interact with you guys. So so that's mostly why I do it. Yeah. And then yeah, the live like question and answer also, like that's something that you can't really do when you're doing like just produce videos. So yeah. So I'll give people a few more minutes to trickle in, and then I'll start in about 4 or 5 more minutes. Oh, excuse me. I tried to turn away from the microphone, but I think that picked that up. Well, yeah, we've got a few people here. I think it's a good time to start. So yeah, so dopamine. Um, my work is really this is really perplexing. The more I try to like be an advocate and put my work out in the public, um, the more I get exposed to just how absurd popular discourse on health is. There's so much misinformation out there, and one of the major drivers of it is clickbait media, um, news outlets and media outlets and entertainment outlets that are all after your attention. And a great deal of the information is completely false. And if you consume it and you get your information from journalists and from pseudoscience doctors, you really run a great risk of damaging your health. This happened to me too throughout my health journey. I'm 42 now. You guys know from reading my book and stuff that I went through really horrible health crises in my mid 30s and early 30s. And a lot of it was driven by this kind of stuff that I'm talking about today. Fads about health that are not actually how the body works. They are contaminated with biases and prejudices from, the last several thousand years of human religious desecration of the human body, conceptualizing life and humanity in ways that have nothing to do with biology, the anthropomorphization of the endocrine system and the nervous system and things like that. And the whole dopamine detox craze is really founded in that kind of misguided understanding of how the body works. And you who are familiar with my work will know that I discovered how to cure my alcoholism and the biological pathways that underpin alcoholism. It has to do with the parasympathetic nervous system and this specific neurochemical called acetylcholine. And I talk about it in my book, and there's a stream on here about it. And there's also a free article on my website, fuckportioncontrol.com, about addiction and how it works. If you do suffer from addiction and alcoholism, you can go consume those sources. And so I am a preeminent expert on dopamine and how the nervous system works in regards to dopamine function and the endocrine system and how it contributes to behaviors and addiction and restlessness and insomnia and all these other connected metabolic problems. But I wanted to show you this actually. So I set this up so I could show it on screen. This is like one of the, I didn't listen to this whole thing actually, so I'm not endorsing this. I don't know what he says in it, but this was a really great screen grab from Cyrus McCandless on his TED Talk about dopamine being misunderstood, and he had kind of this collection of like headlines right here that have all this bullshit on them, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, where clickbait media lies to you about how health works and makes you afraid of all these things, and has these alarming headlines to try to get your attention and get the clicks on there so that they can sell ad space. And not one single headline in here is true, is real. They're all completely false. You actually cannot, it might feel like you're addicted to things like a cell phone or overeating or sugar, but the way addiction works is you can't actually be addicted to any of these things. That's not how addiction works. All of these behaviors, if you're on your smartphone a lot, if you eat a lot, if you feel like you're addicted to sugar, those are all coping mechanisms. Those are different than addiction. Addiction is a biochemical neurological pathway that is very serious, and that's why people get addicted to heroin and alcohol and marijuana. And although, I mean, I don't have a problem with drugs, it's just the addiction that's the problem. That's real addiction. These are not real addiction. And having headlines like this undermines the plight of people who really are addicted and have life-threatening disorders. Being addicted to your smartphone is not an addiction. It's not going to kill you. A heroin addiction could kill you. It's awful, this kind of stuff that the media puts out there. It harms people, it's unproductive, and it's not even actually how these things work and why you might feel like you have a smartphone addiction. That is a coping mechanism. It is not an addiction. So anyway, so I want to talk about what dopamine really is. So one of the sort of the justification for the whole premise of like dopamine detox and dopamine fasting is this idea that dopamine and reward are bad. There is a negative connotation with reward seeking because of the mental health industry, which, to be honest and clear, for, the very many previous decades of its existence was completely incorrect and harmful. Doing things like opening up people's brains and giving them lobotomies. Like Rosemary Kennedy is like a really prime example of the harms that the mental health industry used to cause to people. They're not much better nowadays. It's still very much based on a lot of pseudoscience. Not one single psychologist, working psychologist, is educated to things like neurochemicals. Their entire profession is based on ephemeral existential ideas about human psyche, and has nothing, and they don't ever get taught about the biology part about it. They're not taught about the endocrine system. They're not taught about neurochemicals. They're not taught about how the brain works. Nowadays, psychologists are much more informed than they used to be, and they can sometimes be more effective because they are required to have education about biology. And that's why they're also the only ones that can prescribe medication. Because you have to understand how biochemistry works in order to in order to do that. But still a lot of psychiatrists don't really even know how the body works either. And you'll see these really absurd, offensively, they should be illegal to do this, where like medical doctors will write articles and talk about dopamine, and they have no business doing that. They absolutely do not understand how things like addiction work. I related this incident, this episode, or this experience in another stream, where when I was doing research for my book on child abuse, which is The Perfect Child on my website, I was doing research on finger sucking and thumb sucking, because when I was growing up, one of my sisters sucked her fingers, and my parents just abused the shit out of her because she sucked her fingers. And the advice that they got and the advice that they employed in trying to address that was so clearly abusive and wrong, and it saddled her with severe trauma. And all of us carried childhood trauma into our adulthoods, which is what that book is about. But the information that they got about finger sucking was so clearly not even close to effective or useful. And that was because it was completely based on lies and falsehoods and misunderstandings about how human psychology works. And I was doing some research to see what the mainstream medical establishment actually said about things like finger sucking. And I found like a paper by a preeminent psychologist who talked about finger sucking like it was an addiction and it needed to be broken to prevent addictive behaviors in the adult. And that is fucking child abuse. It is so awful. Finger sucking is not a fucking addiction. Kids are like 2 years old. They're not addicted to finger sucking. It's a coping mechanism that helps them to cope with emotional stress. It's not addiction. And so much child abuse is based in these completely incorrect ideas about how the human brain and body work. And it makes me really angry, because especially now that I'm older and I have lots of nieces and nephews, and I see them being abused, and just children in general, and other and adults who are saddled with trauma that disrupts their lives and causes other behavioral problems and lots of interpersonal conflict and instability and drug and alcohol addiction. It all originates from these completely incorrect ideas about how the human body works. And it's why I, going to medical and mental health professionals for decades, was never able to cure those problems, because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So, hey, Avazij, sorry, I can't pronounce your name. Hey, thanks. Yeah. So and so that's what's happening here with this like idea about dopamine detox, is this idea that reward is bad and that you should avoid it at all costs, and that you're a lazy, slothful person if you seek reward behavior. This is based on anecdotal observations about people who have real addictions, right? Like real drug and alcohol addictions. The perception of those people in general are that they are engaging in hedonism and self-pleasure, and can be irresponsible, and this is not how it works. And if you cannot talk about addiction or recovery if you have never, ever, ever known or been a part of recovery communities and work with people in recovery. It is clearly not how it works. If you know anyone that has alcoholism or addiction, one of the fundamental problems that they have is they have an innate inability to enjoy themselves. They cannot have fun with normal, mundane, recreational activities, things that bring joy and satisfaction to people without addiction do not bring joy and satisfaction to people with those diseases. That's why they use drugs and alcohol, is because it is the only source from which they can find pleasure and enjoyment and reward in life. When you get cured from alcoholism and addiction like me, you start to actually then experience reward feelings and satisfaction from normal, mundane things like waking up in the morning, like making your bed, like making some coffee, like making scones, like hanging out with friends and family. those activities do not bring reward and satisfaction to people who have real addiction problems. So to say that dopamine is a reward seeking enforcer, or seeking like dopamine rushes is reward seeking behavior in a negative way completely invalidates how the human brain actually works. Everyone who is promoting things like dopamine fasting and dopamine detoxification do not realize that we get dopamine reward feedback from so many things in our environment, from having a good meal, from giving your loved ones hugs, from just talking to friends and family, from achieving at work, from like, you know, getting a raise or getting a promotion, or even just doing a good job on like something that you've been working hard on. Dopamine, doing your homework. When you finish your homework, when you're like a high school student, you know, or you know, any elementary school student or whatever, when you finish your homework, you get a dopamine rush. But nobody in these videos is saying like, you know, don't do your homework, or like, you know, don't make food. It's like, because it's fucking ridiculous. They don't understand how dopamine works. Dopamine, the purpose of dopamine in a social animal, like mammal, like we are, is to reinforce so successful social behaviors. That's it. To eat food, to be safe, to build relationships, to have family, togetherness, to be honest and kind. That is what dopamine does. When you talk about dopamine reward seeking behaviors from in negative terms, such as people with addiction, again, we do not get dopamine feedback from those normal successful activities, because they're, and I talk about this in much more in detail in my book, and the stream on addiction, which is also on my channel here. Because of dietary and environmental and childhood trauma stresses, the normal dopamine pathways don't work. So we don't get dopamine reward from normal healthy behaviors. The only way in an addict or alcoholic that they can experience dopamine is to like do more extreme things, like do drug abuse, because drugs and alcohol chemically intervene with those pathways and promote dopamine rises. Whereas people who are healthy have that from normal activities, like having sex, like being with loved ones, like eating good food, like achieving, and from like achievements and accomplishments. But nobody making these videos is like saying like, you know, don't do your homework during a dopamine fast because it'll raise your dopamine, because that's not fucking how dopamine works. So the other thing too about like this idea about dopamine fast is like, okay, so dopamine originates, okay, so actually most steroids in our body originate from cholesterol, actually. And this is like, you know, again, another complete misconception. When I learned that steroids are made from cholesterol, my jaw hit the floor. I could not believe that I had heard most of my life that cholesterol was bad for you. Because where the fuck do you think that your steroids are coming from if you don't have enough cholesterol in your body? And there's all these commercials and pharmaceuticals that decry cholesterol and make it really bad. You cannot make hormones and steroids if you don't have cholesterol. And most steroids in our body come from cholesterol. But the one exception to that is adrenaline and adrenaline derivatives and relatives. Adrenaline comes actually from dopamine. Actually, dopamine is made into adrenaline in the body. And this is why there's actually like a really fine line, and especially in a lot of mental health disorders, such as bipolar disorder, or, you know, borderline personality disorder, and psychopathies, other psychopathies. Dopamine gets funneled into adrenaline. So excess adrenaline can cause dopamine deficiencies. And most people who have problems with addiction and behavioral disorders have excess adrenaline, not excess dopamine. And that's why they're using drugs and alcohol and doing other behaviors to try to get dopamine rushes, because they have too much adrenaline, which is draining their dopamine. And then dopamine is in turn is made originally from the amino acid L-tyrosine, or which can also, and L-tyrosine can also be made from phenylalanine. And then L-tyrosine is made into L-dopa, and then L-dopa is made into dopamine, and then dopamine is then made into adrenaline. And So this idea, like if you really thought that going on like a dopamine fast was good for you, you could just avoid all dietary sources of phenylalanine and tyrosine, right? And that would like drain you of dopamine. And go ahead and try that and see how good it makes you fucking feel. That would be a real dopamine fast. You cannot actually manually control your dopamine releases just through your behavior that much. That's not how the brain works. We have no control over our brain activity. You can't just like reach in there and turn on a switch off and on just because you're like, you know, not like looking at your smartphone. Like that's not how it works. You get dopamine from everything that is quote unquote positive in your life, but it can be hacked through biochemical means, which is why there is drug and alcohol addiction. So if you really do think that dopamine fast is healthy for you, you could just avoid those amino acids, give yourself a dopamine deficiency, and then see how fucking good you feel. Because that's actually how dopamine works. And you'll feel really, really shitty. And when you have like behavioral disorders and you have like drug and alcohol addiction, there is sort of a related issue here where people who feel like they are addicted to their smartphone or overeating or sugar or all these other bogus things that have the word addiction added to them, they're a coping mechanism, and they're sort of the same pathway because it is excess stress. And part of the reason that you want to do things that raise your dopamine when you have excess stress is because stress converts dopamine into adrenaline. So you are manually draining your dopamine because you're experiencing excessive stress that stimulates that conversion from dopamine to adrenaline. And when you have excess adrenaline, it makes you feel very anxious and restless all the time. And so, for instance, like let's say that you do feel like you spend too much time on your phone, right? What are your other behaviors? You probably undereat. You probably are not getting fresh air and sunshine every day. You probably you might have like tumultuous or unfulfilling relationships, and you escape into your phone because you feel more connected and peaceful when you do that. And yeah, you're getting a dopamine rush there. The problem is not that you're getting dopamine from your smartphone or from these other behaviors. It's that you're not getting it from your other environment, the rest of your environment. You, like a drug addict, you can only find the dopamine reinforcement feedback mechanism through other activities like playing video games or being on your phone or eating food, because the rest of your life doesn't provide dopamine. So the idea that you need to go on a dopamine fast is completely antithetical to the feeling and the satisfaction that you're trying to achieve by doing these behaviors. The solution is not to go on a dopamine fast. It's actually to create more dopamine experiences in your life that are not just your work, being on your smartphone or eating food or playing video games. A lot of us, especially our generations right now, and I'm saying our generations because typically most of the people that consume my work and that I interact with are my age or younger. There are some older people that consume my work, but it's very rare. Older people are set in their ways. The baby boom generation is extremely traumatized. They're not open to learning new things, and they're just getting ready to pass away and pass on. And so, and it's kind of too late for most of them anyway. They're just unwilling to listen to any of this. So, but for younger people, this idea that you need to deprive yourself of reward is such fucking self-abuse and bullshit. Like, the reason that you feel unfulfilled and want to be on your phone is because being on your phone makes you feel connected to other human beings. And that's something that's been missing from our environment for a very long time. That's one of the problems. One of the reasons why baby boomers are so fucking crazy is because they grew up in this environment where we built our cities and towns around the automobile, and no one talks and interacts with each other all day long. And the only people they have to talk to are maybe their wife and kids that they fucking hate too. So like, there's this extreme deficit of interpersonal connection in our environments because of the car and our car-centric cities, and a lot of the geopolitical conflict that has been plaguing our communities for the last several decades and generations, the inheritance of war trauma from all the way back from the First World War. Our great-grandparents who went through that got traumatized by that war, passed it on to their children who went through World War II. Then they passed their trauma on to the baby boom generation, who had to grow up with Vietnam and the Korean War and threat of nuclear annihilation during the Cold War. It just drove them all fucking insane. And then on top of that, everyone moved out to the suburbs and hates their neighbors and lives in isolation and has to drive everywhere. So you don't get to go like walking down a nice city street to the market to buy flowers and talk to your neighbors and meet dates and romantic partners. Somebody that I was coaching is this very handsome 27-year-old young man who was talking about having being sad that he was having a very hard time meeting romantic options. And we talked about like dating online and stuff like that, but like it really is so much more fun to just like meet somebody in person. And that moment when you just like you make eye contact with somebody and you just know that you're gonna be in a relationship together even though it hasn't even happened yet. And I'm not talking about you crazy wishful thinking people who are like, oh, she looked at me and she loves me. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like when you actually like have this spark with somebody and they are looking back at you and they do obviously show interest in you. That doesn't happen when you're online. And so but you can find very fulfilling relationships through online things. But anyway, I was talking to him and I'm like, this is a direct consequence of the way that our societies have been set up to facilitate the automobile at our own personal detriment, because we don't have access to random encounters and more fulfilling social lives that our ancestors had when they lived in more close-knit tight communities. And that is one of the reasons why like you crave dopamine, because remember I said that dopamine release occurs mostly from healthy behaviors like eating good food, having good relationships, having sex, giving people a hug, talking to your friends, succeeding in your ambitions in life. All of those bring dopamine release. And so if you don't even have opportunity to like make friends and have good relationships with people, your family's traumatized, so your parents are always yelling at you and they assume the worst with you and treat you like you're a shithead even though you're really probably not, that kind of thing. Like those are all antithetical to dopamine release. So you're not getting very much dopamine in your environment. So you retreat into things like video game playing and smartphone use and eating, because those things bring dopamine and they're also not unhealthy. You're getting social connection. When people live on their phones, they're looking for that connection with other human beings, and it's just coming through your phone. It's not really much different than in person. It's just that older fucking people don't understand technology, and so they think that this is artificial and bad, but it's not. Like you're literally like interacting when you're watching a streamer or you're watching someone on YouTube. You're consuming that interaction with them and the information that they're providing to you and the entertainment and the laughter. And so of course you're going to get dopamine out of that, especially since there's none coming from your fucking environment. So people who like subscribe to dopamine detox and these dumb ideas about how the body works, what they're really looking for is satisfaction in their lives, right? That's what we're all looking for. We're looking for fulfillment. We're looking for companionship and peace and love and hope and harmony. And it's not that you're doing these things because you're addicted. You're doing these things because they're the only source of that you can find in your life. So if you don't want to spend more time on your cell phone, if you want to spend less time on your cell phone or less time playing video games, you can work on bringing more of these other fulfilling opportunities into your real world life, making better relationships, learning how to tell people you're sorry and maintain healthy relationships with other people. Those are some of the best ways to do that. Somebody else that I'm coaching was, really down on himself because he was playing League all the time. And I was like, you don't need to be hard on yourself. There's nothing wrong with doing that. The reason you're doing that is because most of your life is lacking in fulfilling relationships. And so when you get on and you play League with your online friends, you're getting that social fulfillment with other people. It's just coming through the video game, but there's so much negative, condemnation of those things and behaviors because of previous generations who desecrate the human experience and talk about humanity as if we're naturally inclined to evil and slothfulness and all these religious ideas about the human body that are completely wrong. Human beings are naturally cooperative, loving, inclusive, caring, and competent. And we only become not those things through our abusive childhood experiences, which rob us of those innate characteristics of humanity. We are a social creature. It is in our nature to be those things because we cannot survive without them. If we are selfish and exploitative and opportunistic, that usually undermines our own well-being and compromises our safety and security and freedom. And so we naturally, like, I have this conversation all the time when I talk about police, for instance. I have several cousins that are police officers. They're the fucking most annoying people I know in my life. Some police are great. I dated a police officer. He was so fucking hot. He had a bullet wound from getting shot in his chest too. Like, I mean, I'm glad he didn't die, but like, he was like rugged. Like he was like a real cop, and he was super hot. But one time I posted once that police should not be armed, in part for their safety. One of the reasons that police get shot is because criminals and people who police pursue know that the police have guns. So they're even more afraid when they get confronted by policemen, and are more likely to actually shoot at policemen. And then policemen are more likely to shoot back because the policemen are armed in the first place. And this doesn't happen in the UK, where most police are not armed. They aren't attacked the way that they get attacked in the United States. When you have a weapon and you are antagonistic, you're more likely to solicit that same defensive and antagonism in return. And so, I posted something about like, that police shouldn't be armed. It's bad for police. It's bad for crime. And one of my cousins went off and said, "Oh, the society would fall apart if police didn't have guns, and it would be pure chaos." And like, there are 12 million people in the Los Angeles region, and there are only a few 100,000 cops. The percentage is something like 0.0 something percent of ratio of cops to citizens in Los Angeles. The reason that Los Angeles is peaceful, and it is, Los Angeles has a lower rate of crime than many other mid-sized cities and towns in this country. In Los Angeles, I have only ever saw one person with a gun, and one time heard of a shooting in our neighborhood-ish. I mean, Los Angeles is nothing but one giant neighborhood, but like, it was kind of in the vicinity. And as soon as I moved back to Utah and lived in a tiny town, someone in a neighboring trailer park shot their AK-47 into my sister's neighborhood, and bullets went through like 4 different houses and nearly killed a couple kids. Like Los Angeles is way safer than by percentages than smaller towns and cities. And one of the reasons is that humans are naturally cooperative and loving and caring for others. And the reason that Los Angeles is so orderly and so peaceful generally is not because of the police presence. It's because people are naturally like that. Police haven't existed generally in most of human history, and yet we have hundreds of thousands of examples of civilizations and communities where they prospered and had food and did commerce and all these other things. And anyway, so like this whole idea that like dopamine detox and dopamine is negative, and that you should like try to minimize dopamine, just completely defiles what it means to be a human being. It is invalidating our desire and need to be with other human beings, to have love and to be seen, to be appreciated, to be a part of life, to be with others. Those are all the things that you're seeking from being on your smartphone and playing video games and stuff like that. And the reason that you're doing that is because it's not coming from our environment, because our parents and grandparents built this really fucking messed up society where we have so much economic inequality, and we're separated from each other, and you have to drive everywhere to even do anything, and everyone is just basically lonely and sad and separated. And so to get the things that you want from dopamine detox, so-called dopamine detox, you have to be proactive in building access to those things in your own life. You can't wait for other people to do that for you. This was one of the things that I was doing all my young life, where in my 20s and 30s, I was very insecure and I had a lot of trauma from my childhood. And I didn't think that I was capable on my own of building the kind of relationships that I needed. So I would wait for that to happen. I would wait for people to come to me, introduce themselves to me, to meet them at parties or with friends. And normally, and especially because I'm gay, and like a lot of the attention that I received was from other guys, and they were romantic. And so a lot of the friends that I collected were like people who really just wanted to sleep with me, and that's not the same thing. That's not an egalitarian relationship where that there's an imbalance there, and that made me feel comfortable because it made me feel in control of these relationships. But it did not provide me the kind of deeply satisfying interpersonal relationships that I really longed for. And then, a lot of you guys, my story and all the trauma that I went through as an adult, and I learned these new skills wherein I could structure my life in a way that actually provided for those needs that I had been searching for through other behaviors and outlets, like doing things like dopamine detoxing and dieting and exercising. I mean, one of the biggest things that I work with people, everyone that comes to me with to consume my work or to sign up for coaching and stuff like that, everyone wants to be sexy so that people like them. And it's really sad because like we all just want people to be attracted to us and like us. And so we diet and starve ourselves, and we do crazy, and we take steroids that shrink your testicles and make you insane. And and these behaviors are so stressful. So then we have to use drugs and alcohol to deal with that stress. And that makes you even more crazy because it messes with your cognitive function. So then you destroy your interpersonal relationships and abandon people that love and care for you and do things to hurt them. And so then you end up engineering your own miserable situation wherein you've ruined every important relationship in your life and made everybody hate you. And you have to do the opposite of that. You need to cultivate relationships. You need to learn how to apologize and make amends for your behavior. You need to fix your own past childhood trauma so that you can have the space in your life for people to participate. A lot of us chase people away or are afraid of cultivating these relationships because of incorrect ideas we have about ourselves as children from our childhood. And we carry that into adulthood, and it's not true. Like, everyone else is just as nervous and just as desirous of relationships and friendships as you are. And you don't have to pretend pretend that you're confident and have openers and hit on women all the time. You can get fulfilling, wonderful relationships if you learn how to resolve the trauma that you went through as a child. And this is much more complicated. Most people that are on these dopamine diets and things like that aren't actually like that bad off. But you make it worse by doing these things, because again, the problem in the first place is not enough dopamine. It's not too much. It's that most of your dopamine is being siphoned off into adrenaline, and then adrenaline excess, and then when you run out of adrenaline, that's even worse, and that induces high cortisol production, which makes you agitated and restless. And so you're not eating. So you need, you're not eating enough food, and you're not cultivating relationships, and you probably have a lot of control mechanisms, and those all raise stress hormones, and that drains your dopamine. So then you're doing things to raise your dopamine by eating food and being on your phone and browsing social media and playing video games. And again, there's nothing wrong with those things, but your life is lacking other fulfilling, satisfying experiences and healthy sources of dopamine. And you need to change your life and how it's set up to have more sources of dopamine. One, for instance, light deficiency greatly plays into dopamine deficiency, which is why, again, all these people who are promoting dopamine diets, go live in a dark closet for several months. You'll have almost no dopamine. If you really think that dopamine detoxing is how it works, go do that. See how good you feel after doing that. Sunlight raises metabolic respiration, and it lowers torporific hormones that lower the metabolic rate. So it increases the metabolic rate, and that in turn increases the production of dopamine. We are mammals. I also mentioned this in the chapter in my chapter on addiction, but also in the stream on addiction. and also on hair loss, because this also has a lot to do with hair loss. And a lot of people are in here or in searching the internet for answers to hair loss. Sunlight deficiency greatly promotes hair loss because it chokes off blood supply to the scalp. And the reason is because as mammals, we have inherited a hibernation response to a change in the seasons. When the sun dips in the horizon, a lot of the red wavelength spectrum of the light bounces off the atmosphere, but UV ray doesn't really do that. UV ray has such a high frequency that it still penetrates the atmosphere. And that change in the quality of the light actually triggers a hibernation response in us humans. But as human beings and primates, we evolved an anti-hibernation response. So instead of getting rid of the hibernation response, we developed an anti-hibernation response. And guess what that is? That is an increase in adrenaline. And it's really funny too, because I love this, like, at the advent of winter, I get like, really excited, like, oh, the holidays are coming up and it's gonna snow, and you get like really excited for that, and it's like, Thanksgiving, and then Christmas is gonna be here, and you think that the excitement that you're having is because of the holidays. And it actually, I hate to burst your bubble, but it's not. The reason that you get that little thrill at the advent of wintertime is because that is the anti-hibernation response. Usually, if we didn't have that, we would go into hibernation. And the anti-hibernation response is an increase in adrenaline. And because adrenaline is made from dopamine, it also lowers your dopamine. So a little bit of adrenaline can make you, remember, adrenaline is a derivative of dopamine. So they act a lot like each other. And adrenaline can make you feel excited. And this is also the problem behind bipolar disorder. And if you have mood swings, if you are a person that's very moody and you yell at people a lot and you're very unreliable and volatile, you are probably not eating enough, and your adrenaline is going up all the time because adrenaline drains your dopamine, and it might make you feel really excited. The fight or flight response too, that happens during interpersonal conflict, that is a huge release in adrenaline, and it gets your blood sugar mobilized, and it makes you feel amped up and excited. That is what adrenaline does. So like in the wintertime, a little bit of adrenaline makes you feel excited. But then the longer we go through the wintertime, and this is what seasonal affective disorder is, the less sunlight you get, the longer your winter is, the more adrenaline drains your dopamine, because you've got chronically elevated adrenaline. It's chronically depleting your dopamine levels. And so then by the end of wintertime, and I had a friend commit suicide a couple years ago. And if I had known he was that bad off, I would have been more forceful in my trying to help him. But he did that like in the springtime. And a lot of people don't realize that the most depressing time of year is spring, because at that time you have gone through many months of sunlight deprivation, usually, depending on what environment you live in. But when you're in a more northerly climate, like where we are, where it's snowy and cold most of the winter, and you don't go outside, you can incur an extreme dopamine debt through that many months of sunlight deprivation, because by the end of it, your metabolic rate is very low, your adrenaline is very high, your dopamine levels are very low, and so you feel extremely more depressed. But then spring starts, and you see the leaves coming out and the flowers coming out, and you feel even more shitty than you did at the beginning of the wintertime. But most people aren't even cognizant that this is going on, because they are emotionally stressed and don't know any of this stuff. They just think that they're, they know is that they're really depressed and that life feels hopeless. And so I often talk to people and try to get this out here, that remember that the winter time and springtime can be very depressing if you suffer from depression, but it's not because life is hopeless. It's because you're running out of dopamine, and you haven't had sunlight exposure, and you're probably dieting, and you're probably working out too much, and you're probably, you probably have a lot of unresolved childhood trauma that increases the susceptibility to stress hormones. So yeah, anyway, so getting sunlight is really, really important for giving yourself sufficient dopamine so that you don't feel like you need to crave sources of it. Ever since I cured myself of alcoholism and addiction and depression and cancer and all these other issues that I had, every single day for me is satisfying and wonderful. I used to like back when I was an alcoholic and I was suicidal. I every single morning when I woke up, I just wished I loved being asleep. Even if I was having a nightmare, it was preferable to facing the day. And every single morning, I would wake up just resenting the fact that I was alive and you know, having to deal with this stuff. And oh, sorry, Avoj, the chat program censored your message. Yeah. Thanks. I don't think it showed up on screen even. That must be a bug. Sometimes the chat stops on screen and then your messages stop showing up on there. That's kind of annoying. But it's in the it'll be in the playback. But anyway. Yeah. So dopamine detox is bullshit. It's not how dopamine works. The entire idea of it is a desecration of how the human body really works. It's the leveraging of innate natural human instincts for the promotion of other people who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And they're exploiting your weaknesses and vulnerabilities for their own gain. And they don't understand how the human brain really works. A lot of people throw around their credentials as if that makes them an authority on it. It's fucking bullshit. They're liars. They have no idea what they're talking about. If you look at their work, you will see negative stereotypes and prejudices toward the human condition, toward people with addiction problems, toward your natural inclinations and needs as a human being. And you know, those are big giveaways and big tells, and you don't need to listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. You need to have compassion for yourself and take care of yourself and provide yourself the needs of things that you need in your life. You need fulfilling relationships. You need stable relationships, which is why, like, I often talk about the ability to apologize and say sorry. A lot of people find that to be paralyzing, that idea. I'm related to a lot of them. So for some reason, the idea of saying sorry to people, because a lot of people's control mechanisms are meant to have power over others. And if you are actually apologizing to somebody, that means ceding power, right? But in fact, your relationships are much more secure if you do that. If you demonstrate to people that you are willing to subvert your own ego in service of your relationship with them, that shows them that you actually care about them. If you do the opposite and you refuse to take responsibility for your behavior, you are telling people that they don't mean anything to you, and then they're going to leave you, and they will, or they at least will just, you know, they just will remove themselves emotionally from your life. And so you end up getting less fulfilling relationships because of your ego and your unwillingness to care for others. And so being able to have those skills to maintain personal relationships and set healthy boundaries, not just boundaries. People set boundaries all the time. You have to set healthy boundaries, and healthy boundaries are not meant to control others. They're just meant to take care of your own needs. So if you're manipulative and vindictive and judgmental, you know, and a lot of these are innate control mechanisms that we just learned from abuse, which is why, like, my second book talks about child abuse and how this kind of stuff develops into control mechanisms, and where control mechanisms come from, and then how to resolve them, and teaches you, like, you know, skills like being able to say sorry and maintain healthy relationships. And so if you do these things and you provide yourself healthy sources of dopamine, then you feel satisfied all the time. And it doesn't even matter, you know, like being gay and having been raised in a very hateful conservative community. I don't have relationships with my parents and most of my siblings. And it's very sad, but I still have a very happy, fulfilling life. Like every single day I'm excited to be alive, and even just the most mundane things bring me immense satisfaction, which they never did before when I was younger, because of the quantity of abuse and the biochemical imbalances that I was suffering from because of diet and environment, like what we've been talking about. So yeah, anyway, so that's how dopamine really works. You don't need to do detox. It's such bullshit. It's just clickbait. It's very harmful. So spread that word. Tell your friends. Share the stream with people that are going through that. Anyway, okay. So now you guys, like, you can ask all sorts of questions, whatever you like. and we will end the stream when the questions stop. So go ahead if you have any. I'd like to hear from you. Mike, you asked regarding cholesterol tests. Do I think ApoB test is better marker for heart disease? Oh, I don't really actually, Mike, sorry. I don't really know a lot about the specific tests because I find them unhelpful usually. It doesn't really matter what kind of cholesterol you have. You just need to eat the kind of diet and address symptoms the way that I talk about in my book. Actually, it's kind of interesting too that you brought that up because, like, you know, one of the ways in which the conversation around dopamine in terms of the medical industry and scientific research is misguided is there is an enormous fixation on extreme minutia. So you got people talking about receptors and you know, and other metabolites and you know, certain pathways. And the more that scientific information gets into the weeds, the less accurate it actually is. And like, have you guys actually, I thought this up last night. Do you guys, oh yeah, thanks Jay. I do. Oh, actually I don't, but I'll talk to you about that in a sec. You've heard, you know, you hear the expression, can't see the forest for the trees. A lot of scientific research can't see the forest for the leaves. They get so caught up in the minutia that they don't understand the why of it all. And that's one of the things that has actually informed my work, is that I incidentally got very good at always asking why a biological pathway exists, or why it's dependent on certain nutrients or environmental conditions. And that gave me far more answers than knowing things about receptors and stuff like that. And receptors don't even work the way that science think it does. Most receptors are just called into existence by the thing that they receive. And receptors also imply this sort of like lock and key or plug and socket kind of idea, where like a cell receives a hormone and that hormone attaches to the receptor and that activates some other pathway in the cell, but they never know what that pathway is because it just asks more questions. It doesn't solve any of the answers. It doesn't matter what receptor something has, because then that just, okay, then what happens after it receives the receptor, attaches to the receptor? That it's not productive. When you ask why something is important for a cell, you get more of the answer in terms of like evolutionary biology. What function, what purpose did this solve in our evolutionary history? And that provides way more answers. For instance, understanding that dopamine is regulated by sunlight is a evolutionary survival mechanism. We as mammals evolved to hibernate because there was no food in the wintertime, and mammals evolved in the more toward the poles because there were less dinosaurs there. And because dinosaurs ate mammals. So the mammals that thrived lived in colder climates where there were less dinosaurs. But when you live in a colder climate, there's not as much food. So you have to sleep when there's, you know, I mean, but hibernation isn't sleep actually though. But you have to hibernate during the wintertime when there's no food if you're going to live in an environment where it snows, you know, for half of the year. So like understanding that the reason that sunlight changes in the environment lower our metabolic rate during the wintertime were because of evolutionary survival when there was less food around really tells you why dopamine responds to sunlight activity. And the importance then of getting sunlight in order to raise your metabolic rate and raise things like dopamine. So and then also the anti-hibernation response, like one of the reasons that adrenaline does that is because adrenaline releases sugar from glycogen storage in your body. So that increases circulating sugar in your bloodstream, and that helps to keep you awake. It keeps you from hibernating because it's a constant supply of sugar to keep cells active. So like that's like one of the functions of adrenaline, and that doesn't fucking matter what receptor it goes into. And so looking at receptors, you're completely missing the big picture. So I often don't recommend or even use tests because they don't tell us anything we don't know from the symptoms. Sometimes they can be helpful for people, especially if you don't really know what's going on. Like a vitamin D test is sometimes really helpful and stuff like that. But But like if you're fat, if you've got like, if you're sluggish, if you're losing hair, you're going to have like deranged cortisol. I mean, not cortisol, sorry, cholesterol. You're going to have like deranged cholesterol levels. So it doesn't really matter what test you get, because yeah, your cholesterol is going to be wrong. Like it's not going to be working right. And the answer is not getting a test. It's in establishing the normal healthy human diet and environmental requirements for being healthy. And then that will make your cholesterol work normally. Getting lots of fruit, getting lots of sunshine, getting lots of carbohydrate, getting a source of iodine in your diet, all of these factors that I talk about in my book that are the fundamental basic foundation of the human diet. Like I've mentioned too a lot in a lot of my streams and work about how like there is a proper human diet, and people have valiantly tried to discover what this is. Just like cats have a certain, like you can't feed cats bird seed, or they die, right? and you can't feed dogs. Actually, dogs are kind of omnivorous, so they actually can eat quite a bit. But they're also, dogs need a certain nutrition. They need more protein than than a normal diet. But we are much more herbivorous than we are carnivorous, even though we are omnivorous. And there is a real human diet, but a lot of dumb people want to do like paleo and keto and stuff like that because they want to imagine our ancestors as these tough warriors running around the savannah with spears and hunting giant mastodons. And yeah, we did that, but that was after we evolved into human beings. that does not include our much longer history preceding like the earliest human beings. And our earliest human ancestors were peaceable, tree-dwelling, moderately sized primates that ate a diet exclusively of fruit, nuts, blossoms, and insects. That was it. And maybe like root vegetables. Like, that's what our diet was. We were not hunters. We did not become hunters until we discovered tools. So what did we eat before then? We definitely did not run down antelope. We lived in the trees, and and also we evolved on the shores of ancient Lake Megachad. Foraging in the shallows for shellfish. But that was even later. Like our earliest ancestors had a diet of nuts, fruits, and berries, and insects, and maybe like root vegetables as well. And then later like some shellfish and stuff like that. And so like this idea that like primal diet is like only eating raw beef testicles is so fucking stupid. Like we did not do that. We didn't run up behind wild wildebeest and tear off their testicles and eat them. Like that is not what human beings did. So anyway, so like there is a basic human diet, and there's very fundamental nutrients in our diet: carotenes and anthocyanins and other polyphenols and sugar and zinc and lithium and good fats, oleic acid and saturated fats, and all of these. And then sunlight is a nutrient. We lived under the open sun every single day for hours and hours and hours. And there's lots of like things like that. And so like you don't really need to do. That's where all of the like science is great, right? Science. I've used thousands of studies to construct my book and do my work. And even the bad ones, I can find useful information in them. But science gets so lost in the weeds and the excessive like fixation. It's good to know what these do, but receptors and really and whether or not you have LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, that doesn't matter for your practical experience. For your practical experience, you need to always have the fundamental requirements for a healthy human diet. Vitamin C too, obviously. We can't make vitamin C, and your body dumps vitamin C every single night, especially when you're under severe metabolic stress. When the body releases adrenocorticotropin hormone, which stimulates cortisol production, that the body's response to that is to get rid of vitamin C, because vitamin C sustains a high metabolic rate. And when you have high stress hormones, the body wants to turn down the metabolic rate in order to prolong calorie retention so that you don't run out of nutrients. So when you are having metabolic disease, and that is also an evolutionary mechanism. There are only a handful of animals that don't produce their own vitamin C, like guinea pigs and other primates, and there's a couple others. the reason to not produce your own vitamin C is so that when there is a deficiency of food in your environment, your metabolic rate slows down even slower than what would be possible if you made your own vitamin C. So animals like dogs and cats and other animals that make their own vitamin C, their metabolisms stay higher all the time. And that's one of the reasons why those animals also have a much easier time staying lean, because you need vitamin C to properly use cholesterol, and to repair tissue and keep the metabolic rate high. And so in human beings, we don't make our own vitamin C, and that allows us to persist longer during times of famine and nutrient deprivation. And then that enables survival. But as a consequence of that, if you're not getting vitamin C because of our contemporary industrial diets that really suck, then your metabolic rate will just stay in the toilet, and you'll find it impossible to get it up to a sufficient level that helps you to be healthy and active and have lots of energy and be fit and healthy and all that kind of stuff. So, and that should come from your diet. You can use a supplement to help, but it should come from your diet first and foremost. So anyway, Jay, you asked, do I know anything about eye floaters? I don't actually. I've never really looked into it because it's not really a big deal. Mine completely went away once I got better, though. So like, it's something that really, I think it's really easy to fix. Like, as long as if you just get your metabolic health under control, it'll also resolve. I used to have lots of them all the time. My eyesight got better too. I didn't need glasses, but my eyes, I needed glasses when I went to the theater. Like, I couldn't really, the movie screen was a little bit blurry. So I would always wear my glasses when I went to see a movie. But several years after getting better, that changed, and my eyesight, I can now see extremely far away. Not like, I don't have like 20/20 vision, but I can still read words like way down the street and see a movie screen just fine. I actually talk about this in another stream too. I talk about physical attraction, which actually has nothing to do with whether or not you're in shape. One of the physical, one of the true physical attributes that does factor into a physical attraction is your eyes, actually. And there's that funny trope that the eyes are the window to the soul. It actually is kind of true. When you get metabolically ill, your the ligaments that hold your eye in place weaken, and your eyes will actually fall back into your head farther. And you can notice this in like older people. Older people's eyelids are closed more often because their eyes are not held forward the way that they normally should be. So, and that keeps the eyelids open easily, because the eye is like sort of like, it's not in the middle of, but it pushes the eyelids out, and the eyelids move along the eye. So if the eye falls back into the skull, the eyelids droop much more easily. So older people will have their eyes won't be open very much. And that's because the ligaments that hold the eye in place weaken and fatigue. And so the eye falls back in the head. And so, and that, like, I had that too, because I was so ill, and I really noticed that. And as I started to get better, that reversed. And I noticed, and it's one of the pictures actually that I used on the back of my book when I was 36. I published my book when I was 37, and I used a picture from when I was 36. That's on the back of my book. And it was such a great picture, because like I didn't know that this was a thing until I saw my pictures that I would take, and I'd be like, oh, what the fuck? Like, my eyes are like much brighter and bigger and more expressive. And that was because of all of the metabolic work that I did, brought those ligaments back and strengthened them and fixed them. And that's probably kind of the same thing that got rid of the eye floaters, was because my eye health just improved in general because of that. So it could be it could be something as simple as like vitamin C. The eye floaters are probably some kind of protein coagulation inside of the eye fluid, the aqueous fluid, and things like vitamin C and biotin help your body to properly metabolize protein and amino acids. So it's probably something like that. Wonder Bunny, totally light deficient here in the Pacific Northwest. Does a red light panel help? Yeah, it does. Actually, yeah, red light is really nice during the winter time, because there is a deficiency of it. Light deficiency in general will cause depression and low metabolic rate. It doesn't have to be a red light panel, though. There is red light in warm, any warm spectrum light will have red light. And I have to clarify, because people misunderstand me all the time. I am not talking about the temperature of a light. Some people misunderstand me and they'll get like a hot light. Like I knew somebody that lived in Georgia and they bought a halogen lamp, and Jesus Christ. And they were like, I can't use it because it's so hot. And I was like, yeah, I don't mean heat temperature. When I say color temperature, I mean color. White light is composed of different spectrum of wavelengths of light. And if you ever see like the light that comes out of a prison or water droplets on your window and it splits into a rainbow, those are the spectrum of light. And to the left of the spectrum, you have blue and purple and UV light, and to the right you have warm colors, red, yellow, and orange. And red is always on the side, and then red transitions into infrared, which you can't see but you can feel. So since wintertime is also often very cold, you also can use a heat warm light, like a red warming light or a halogen, and that supplemental heat just feels nice. And it does help a little bit because part of the thing is when you're cold often, and it's like the wintertime, your body has to make heat. And if you do supplement some heat like that, like a warm blanket out of the dryer, or you sit in front of a warming light, that supplemental heat takes off some of the responsibility that your cells need to have to make heat. And so and it feels nice. But if you don't live somewhere cold, don't get a temperature warm light. But light therapy does need to be in color temperature on the warm spectrum. So the number that you use to measure that is when you buy a lamp, a light bulb or something, it will tell you the Kelvin temperature, which is the color temperature. And it should be 3000 K or less. And that means that there's more warm spectrum wavelengths in that light, and it'll just look warmer, like more yellowy. Like any light that looks like yellowish is gonna be fine. But if you want, you can get a red light device and have red light, and that's fine. And it more directly provides red light. And I've had a red light for a long time, an LED one that's very powerful that I use, and it was like $250, and it was definitely worth the price. I experimented. I bought this laser red light, and it was such bullshit. And it was also like 200 and didn't do shit. It was so weak. The most important aspect in light besides color temperature is its brightness. So if you see these really expensive devices, they're often also very weak anyway, and they're not really worth it. And because it needs to be bright, because you can compare it to the sun. When you walk out in the sunshine, it's super fucking bright, right? And so artificial lights cannot make up for sunlight deficiency, but they can help to sort of mitigate some of the effects of the deficiency until the weather changes and you can get more natural sunlight. So yeah, supplemental light is never a replacement for normal sunlight. It can just like sort of supplement some extra when you can't. So Mike, vitamin D supplements don't increase clotho, but sun-derived vitamin D does. How is vitamin D from sun different than supplements? I read a study once that showed that vitamin D made in your body from the sunlight lasts in the body for much longer than a supplement. And that's probably actually, though, because when you have a sunlight deficiency, the body increases an enzyme that actually catabolizes vitamin D. It destroys active vitamin D. That happens during sunlight deficiency. So sunlight deficiency doesn't just cause a vitamin D deficiency because you're not getting vitamin D. It causes it because the body actively destroys vitamin D during sunlight deficiency. And that's part of the same biological survival evolutionary mechanism, just like our body dumps vitamin C. Vitamin D participates in higher active metabolic function. And when the sun's not out and it's wintertime, there's no food around, our body has evolved from our ancient ancestors to respond to nutrient deprivation in the environment to lower the metabolic rate. So during the wintertime, and if you have vitamin, or even if it's not wintertime, if you just don't ever get sunlight, it doesn't matter if you take a vitamin D supplement, it's not going to work because your body will actively inactivate it. because that the enzyme is called 24-hydroxylase, and its level gets raised during dark stress, during absence of sunlight. So that's probably part of the reason, is that like a study that analyzed natural vitamin D and a supplement would probably have the people with the supplement not getting sunshine, and that would increase 24-hydroxylase. So there's a factor. And again, this is why even scientists don't often know what the fuck they're talking about, because biology is so complex and you have to know about all of these things to really understand what's going on. So if a study was looking at those kinds of differences and not talking about like the role of 24-hydroxylase, and like that's not something you can control for. There is no way that you could control for 24-hydroxylase unless there was maybe an inhibitor of it, but that you could use. But generally, like if you're, the group that's getting the supplement would probably not be getting direct sunlight, because that would mean they're getting natural vitamin D. So you would take them out of the sunlight, but then that would increase the inactivation of the supplemental vitamin D that they're getting. So you get into a lot of complex stuff like that. But that's probably one of the reasons, is because darkness actually increases its catabolization. So also, how do I recommend to get adequate sunlight in the winter? Oh, well, I mean, you just oh yeah, actually, yeah, a hot tub might be fun. You could totally go out in the hot tub during the day. The problem in the winter, especially if you're up in Canada, it's the quality of the wavelengths and the composition of the wavelength of the light that you're receiving. So it's not really that you're getting a sunlight deficiency. It's that most of the red spectrum is bouncing off of the atmosphere, and you're mostly getting UV light, and it's no more UV light than what you get in the summertime. It's the ratio of red light to UV light, and that changes because of the angle of the sunlight hitting our hemisphere. And so you would not be able to reverse that. The only way you could do that is to go fly to Australia during the wintertime. and so you just, but there's nothing wrong with it. Like we've evolved to do this, like our body. That's why we have that's why we have we enter a torporific-ish state during the wintertime. Like our body, you can do it. But if you have like a light deficiency because you're indoors all day long, all through the summer, your wintertime is going to be much more stressful, because you've basically been in wintertime all year long anyway, and it's just continuing. So you could go out. So you just go out. Yeah, just go out for walks, and you can just sit behind a glass window. Just getting some sunlight through. Glass also blocks a lot of UV rays anyway. So in the wintertime, just sitting in front of a window, with your face and maybe your torso exposed. Also, though, actually, I talk about how men need light on their testicles to stimulate testosterone production. So, if you're a guy, you could lounge naked in front of a window. Just don't get arrested. Don't expose yourself to people. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you could get a hot tub and go outside too, but it's not going to be the same as the wintertime. You just have to endure through the winter until the sun comes back up. Your cholesterol is off the charts, but you ate lamb before the blood test. Oh, that's funny. ApoB is becoming the updated mainstream medical screen for lipids, and LDL tests is losing favor. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't really care about the medical industry. They're such shit. The only thing that the medical industry is good at is surgery and giving antibiotics. In terms of metabolic disease, they have no idea what they're doing. That's why we have pandemic people. You get government officials and politicians and doctors complaining about the state of health of people, like the rampant amounts of diabetes that we have and obesity. That's their job. They're supposed to be handling that and helping people get better, and they're not. They're just telling people that they need to eat less and go walk, and that's not how these things work. Diabetes is caused by pathogenic organisms. It's caused by candida and streptomyces in the gut. and C. difficile. I mean, it is just so clear and apparent. There are studies that show this, and doctors don't care the fuck about studies. They don't do continuing education. They get training from medical institutions that don't tell them any of this shit, and then they don't know what the fuck they're doing. So then people are fat because they also don't know what they're doing. So like, I just don't care about what they're doing, because it's not like, it's just never useful. It's just like, it's just more money. Like, they're probably phasing out those tests, Mike, because someone's patent on the LDL test ran out, and the new test actually has a patent, so they're making more money on using that test. That's honestly like probably the real reason. It has nothing to do with science or health. It's all money. The entire medical, all this stuff, the dopamine detox, everything that you're clicking on, it's all money. It's for ad revenue, for clicks, and selling medications. All of it is profit. It has nothing to do with biology, and that's the whole problem. That's why this kind of thing is happening. A doctor tells you the wrong stuff, and you have to go to them and get medicated, and like that doctor that I complained about, who the psychologist who said that children sucking their fingers was an addiction. Like, you know, the more children that are abused because they're sucking their fingers makes a bigger pool of traumatized adults that she can profit from. I mean, it's fucking absurd. You know, that's the whole reason that this stuff is happening. It's just all money. It's all money. So the food map diet, I don't know I don't remember the details. I looked up it once. It's kind of, it's one of the closer ones to being good, but it also still falls real short. It's not good. It doesn't work. There was somebody that I was following on social media recently. He was like a podcaster, and he started posting about he started doing a keto diet, and I didn't say this. I was gonna say, hey, like, I can't tell you how many people come to me for help because of the erectile dysfunction and hair loss that the keto diet causes them. When that happens to you, you know, you can come ask me for help. I didn't say that. I didn't want to be a total dick, but I did tell them on another post. I was like, there's no better way to kill off your microbiome than go without carbohydrates. And of course, you know, they don't care, because this is all ideological. Like, and that's one of the things behind the dopamine detox. Those arguments are ideological. It's this idea that you need to not seek reward. Like, well, why the fuck not? Your idea of reward is because you have abysmal self-esteem and you don't think you should take care of yourself. You think you need to be disciplined and do what everyone expects of you and be fit and lean so that everyone thinks you're sexy. And you don't actually care about your well-being. You care about other people accepting you. And that is what destroys you. That's what destroyed me. My desire to be fit caused me to have my trauma caused me to have body dysmorphia. And then I starved myself, and I crashed my metabolism and my immune system, and I got cancer, and I got fat. And then I was associating with shallow pathological assholes who all rejected me because I was fat. But they're that way too because they have their own trauma, you know? So, yeah, I mean, it's just all ideological, and ideology should not inform in health information. It has nothing to do with ideology. Biology can foster morals, but morals cannot foster biology. It does not work both ways. Biology is entirely logical and only based in just terrestrial basic science. It has nothing to do with emotions or beliefs or anything like that. But all of this information is, and it exploits your own ideology. If you were traumatized as a child into believing that your self-worth is dependent on whether or not you play video games, you're going to be clicking on this stuff. Or if fat is bad for you, you're going to be clicking on this stuff and driving up those click numbers so that they can make advertising money. That's all that it is. So anyway, is psyllium husk something I discourage? Yeah, probably. The more rough that fiber is, it does agitate your gut, and you don't need to do that. There's plenty. If you just eat carrots and fruit, and there's a lot, like pectin is an indigestible carbohydrate that's much more effective than psyllium husk. So psyllium husk can sometimes work for people though, because like if they have a really bad gut microbiome, it could probably help So I wouldn't say you shouldn't have it, but there's just better options. So like you could use it if you want to, and if it gives you a good result. But sometimes if you take too much of it, it can really mess you up and like give you a lot of irritation. And a lot of the reasons that people take it is because they don't know about certain dietary things, like how sugar promotes healthy gut microbes, and fruit promotes healthy gut microbes, especially like berries and things like that. So then they'll use psyllium husk to make up for eating all this other crap that's destroying their stomach. And also vitamin D in sunlight regulates the gut microbiome. So, so then they get dependent on things like that. And so there's better options, but I wouldn't say no. If it does help you, yeah, go ahead and use it. But I wouldn't say no. But there are better options, and you don't even really need to buy fiber, as long as if you're eating plenty of vegetables and fruit and things like that, you're getting plenty of fiber. So yeah. Hey, Word, regarding indoor light in winter, is using a warm bright bulbs in overhead fixture enough, or a lamp better because it can be positioned closer to the body? I would say yes, the latter is better. Overhead lights are probably too far away from you to do much good, unless they're like really, really bright. But generally they might not. They're probably not. So yes, I would say to have a lamp, like having a lamp on your desk with a good bulb in it is ideal, and that can shine really directly on your eyes and your face and your thyroid. You can position it so it doesn't interfere with your viewing your computer screen if you're working and stuff like that. You can even put it behind you, but behind you, because even in my book, I talk about light therapy for resolving depression and PTSD and addiction and alcoholism, because it stimulates the dorsal raphe nucleus at the top of your spinal column. That specifically needs light stimulation around the back of your head, but general light therapy should be in front, so your eyes receive the light, because that is what lowers the torporific hormones that destroy vitamin D and lower your metabolic rate. Is the eye reception of that light. So, so that's why, like, if overhead lights are bright enough, but they're not. And very often too, a lot of people don't know this, and I do talk about this in other streams and my other work, is that lights at work are very often the blue spectrum. Actually, I should have talked about this earlier when I was talking about the composition of wavelengths of light and how the red light is more important. The blue light is also damaging and harmful. Blue light generally causes energy consumption in the body, and red light causes energy production. And a lot of work lights are fluorescent lights, which are very heavily in the blue spectrum. And that's one of the reasons, if you have like if you have a corporate job and you're at work and there's all these lights, overhead lights, and if you feel drained by the end of the day, that's one of the symptoms of being exposed to that blue light every single day. And it can get really worse the longer you work under those, and especially during the winter time. It would be really great if companies would change those out for more warm spectrum lights. The idea behind using those is that from in the mid-century, when this information came out, corporations started using those lights because they thought it would stimulate workers to work better and keep you awake. That's the whole fucking point of them. It's not energy consumption, although that does save companies money, so that is a factor as well, but it has nothing to do with efficiency. It's actually it is a George Orwellian kind of new world order to be working under fluorescent lights, because the whole point is that they think that it's forcing your physical body to be stimulated all the time and keep you from getting tired. But that's actually not how it works, because excessively stimulating the body causes it to run out of energy. So then you get really tired really fast during the day. And by the end of the day, you're just completely useless because you have no more energy left. And oppositely, the warm spectrum lights, while they might make you feel relaxed, they also promote energy production. That's why you feel relaxed, because you have enough energy production by your cells. So then you actually are more productive as a worker when you have good light composition, because it's helping you produce energy, not just forcing you to use the energy. It's fucking insane. Jay, should greens be cooked or raw? Okay, mostly. Well, it depends on how rough they are. I love salad. Like, there's sometimes nothing better than just like a really good salad with like tender baby spinach, and or some nice like butter lettuce, and some cucumber and a good dressing, and it really is so good. And it's really funny too, actually. And I maybe you guys have heard this. I think I do talk about this in my book, but like when I first started getting better, and a lot of my work is based on Ray Peat, so that's where I like learned a lot of that's where I started, and my diet, one of the ways in which I started to raise my metabolic rate was to consume a lot of fruit and sugar daily, and I was also getting more sunshine at that time and taking certain supplements and stuff like that. But strangely, I noticed, like, probably after about 2 or 3 months of eating tons of fruit and sugar every single day, I all of a sudden started to crave vegetables. Like, I had an insatiable craving for collard greens. And it was so weird because I had never craved collard greens before. I would have cravings for potatoes and bread and meat, like a good steak or fish tacos. Oh my God, I used to go get fish tacos with my ex. They were just the best thing. They were fried and, deep fried and crispy. And they had like this really great, like remoulade on top. So good. But I never had cravings for vegetables. And a few months after doing this, high sugar, high fruit diet to raise my metabolic rate, I started just craving like collard greens and salad. And it was so weird because I didn't expect that. And, a lot of times people have this idea that to get healthy, you've got to force yourself to eat like roughage and like healthy greens and stuff like that. But that's not how it works, actually. In order to digest plant food, you have to have a healthy gut microbiome. Plants are healthier for us, but they are harder to break down. When you're metabolically ill, the body then craves foods that are easier to digest, like dairy and grains and meat, because they're refined, and meat and dairy don't require much digestive strategy. They break down very easily under stomach acid. But plants have a lot of like anti-digestive properties and fiber and things like that. And you have to have a good microbiome in order to break down plants. But the way to get a good microbiome is not then to start by consuming lots of vegetables and rough foods, because you don't possess the microbiome, so they will not break down. And then you don't get the nutrients that are in them. The way to really promote a good, healthy microbiome is by consuming sugar and fruit. Our most productive, healthy, protective microbes thrive on carbohydrates and the nutrients that are in fruit, like the certain polyphenols that are unique to fruit. And so all of a sudden, after several months of doing this, I started craving vegetables because it had restored my gut microbiome. And then I was able to eat vegetables. And that continues to this day. I will literally, I don't want to deter anybody from this, because you still can have steak, but like, I actually haven't had a steak in probably a year. I've had red meat, like I've got, and pork too. I make carnitas every once in a while. I really fucking love carnitas. It's pork cooked in, it's Mexican, it's pork cooked in orange juice and others, and seasoned and oregano and some onion and stuff like. It's so good. And then it fries in its own fat. Oh my God, it's so good. So anyway, so I still have meat, but I really don't have meat very often, though. I probably only eat meat probably once or twice a week, and I don't try to do that. It's just what I eat what I crave. I have no self-control. I just eat what I want to. And I regularly crave salad. And so I'll make like a butter lettuce, cucumber, tomatoes, some olive. I love like the flavors of olives and feta cheese and vinegar and artichoke hearts. Oh, it's just so good. And then every once in a while I'll crave chard or collard greens. And so the answer, though, to the short answer to your question is that if they are rough, they should be cooked. You should never have kale or the rougher greens raw. It's just, they're so hard for our body to break down. You'll get far more nutritive miles out of cooking them, but you don't need to cook the gentle ones. Baby spinach, always cook adult spinach. Baby spinach, you should have raw. heat denatures some nutrients, so it's kind of good to mix it up between raw and cooked. And but a pure raw diet is bad too, because we can't break down a lot of plant foods. But anyway, like carotenes slightly denature when you're cooking them. But cooking also releases more from the food matrix. So studies show that like you get more carotene uptake from cooked carrots and sweet potatoes and stuff like that, but it doesn't have quite the same activity as it does when it's raw. So like, shredding some raw, and I've got a great carrot salad on my website. It's so good. It's got it's carrots with raisins and nuts and some cheese and a dressing, and you fry an egg on top. It's so good. There's a much better way to have carrot salad. So I mix it up, but I would always cook the more rough greens. There's no reason to have them raw. And more specifically, one of the reasons is in that in more adult leaves, there's more. One of the problems, like Ray talks about a lot of anti-nutrients, but one that he doesn't really talk about, which is the most problematic, are enzyme inhibitors. A lot of plants have enzyme inhibitors in them, and so they completely block your digestive enzymes so that you then don't even digest the food. And a really great example of this is raw grain. If you can test this out if you want. If you have some raw, if you have some spelt berries in your house, or you shouldn't have common wheat in your house, but if you do, you can take like those grains and you can like chew them in your mouth, and it will never break down. it actually just becomes gum. And it's probably where like the idea of gum came from, is these kinds of food, or like why natural gum does it too, because enzyme inhibitors completely block the enzymes in your saliva and in your pancreatic juice when you digest them. So it just stays this chewy mass in your mouth, and you could chew as long as you want, and it will just never break down. But that's why, but even a little bit of heat will inactivate those. So this demonstrates, like, if you make a flour tortilla out of spelt, which I highly recommend, it's fucking amazing. I make my own homemade tortillas and burritos very often. When you make a tortilla, you only cook it for no more than like a minute total. And it's on one side for like 30 seconds and the other side for 30 seconds on a hot plate, a hot pan. And that's enough heat to inactivate those enzyme inhibitors. It's very quick, and it doesn't really even require very much heat. They're very, very susceptible to heat. So you really don't even need to cook the greens for very long, but they should be cooked still. So the rough ones, but there's also nothing wrong. The baby ones don't have those enzyme inhibitors, because they're still maturing and growing, and so you don't need to. And you can taste the difference too. Like if you eat raw kale and spinach, it fucking tastes gross. But if you eat raw baby spinach, it tastes really good. So you can use your tongue to inform you to that as well. So. How is GABA connected or interacting with dopamine? I think I write about that in my book, but I don't remember specifically off the top of my head. I think that dopamine promotes. I don't know, and I think what is that? mDNA? No, mNDNA. That excitatory, like, also thing that's related. I think, if I remember, I don't remember exactly, but I think that and GABA and dopamine all have a regulatory relationship. But I don't remember exactly which comes first. Yeah, I can't even remember that research that I did on that. Sorry. Is Pilates a pro-cellular respiration modality of exercise? No, actually. Anytime you prolong contraction in muscles, it can quickly deplete oxygen and result in lactic acid production. You're much better doing short contractive exercises like strength training than Pilates or yoga, even yoga. I used to do yoga like really religiously. Like I went to there's these famous yoga studios out in Santa Monica in Los Angeles, and what was his name? Brian Kest, was that his name? and all those people over there that are oh, shout out to my old yoga teachers, Ashley and I can't remember his name because they're brothers and they're Lithuanian. I think they're Lithuanian American, and one of them was Eris. Was his name Eris? Yeah, I think his name was Eris. And they were on one of them was on Survivor. And they were so hot, and they were really nice, and they were really great teachers. Old school traditional yoga is great. It's not as great as proponents of it say that it is, though. And in fact, actually, I have not done yoga. Well, I don't do any exercise actually at all. But not because you can't. And I want to make that clear. Like, if you want to exercise, go ahead. My rule of thumb with exercise and whether or not it's good for you is that it always needs to be fun. If you are not having fun, it is harming your body. It needs to be fun. And if you're not having fun, it means that you are creating too much lactic acid and your body cannot handle it. If you are having fun and it's not stressful and hard for you to do, that means that your body can handle it. The problem during exercise is that, of course, that our body uses up the oxygen very quickly, and then cells have to revert to, or can no longer perform oxidative respiration, and then that results in higher lactic acid production, and lactic acid lowers the metabolic rate, and then excessive lactic acid can really harm your metabolic health. But American yoga, the way that they bastardize yoga and that hot yoga kind of stuff, is that they've turned it into an exercise practice that's extremely stressful on the body. And if you look at yoga practitioners who do that, they often have almost no muscle. They're very lean, and that's one of the reasons they're constantly inducing extreme amounts of cortisol and adrenaline production, and cortisol catabolizes lean muscle. So any time that you're doing that, you have high cortisol through behavior or environment. It's also destroying your internal organs. This is why long distance training and cardio and like excessive cardiovascular activity can be so harmful for human health. It's really funny too, because runners always drop dead of a heart attack just randomly. And it's really funny too, actually. So the other day I was watching an episode of Antiques Roadshow on YouTube, and this woman came on and she had a picture of her, I think it was her grandpa, he lived in Boston and was always, and ran the Boston Marathon several times. And one time while he was training, when he was 24, he just suddenly fucking dropped dead of a heart attack. And this happens regularly with runners, and they always just say that, oh, he had a bad heart. No, that's not how the fucking human body works. You're dying because you are over consuming your nutritive resources through the function of stress hormones, because you're overtraining and probably under eating as well in people that have severe episodes like that. But I don't even know if it's possible to eat enough to support that kind of activity, because your body consumes all of the fat, then it starts to consume. I mean, first your body actually consumes a muscle. That's why runners are often very, very lean, unless they are hitting the steroids, hitting the juice. Because those stress hormones catabolize your lean tissue for a source of sugar, because our muscles store sugar, but the only way to get to them when you run out of sugar during exercise is to catabolize those muscles. So when you exercise excessively, your body consumes itself, and it can only do that to so much, and eventually you have a heart attack because your body has no more nutritive resources to keep running. But anyway, Pilates is kind of along that line. One of the good aspects about Pilates and yoga is the stretching, because stretching actually produces energy. It doesn't consume energy. So, and a lot of Pilates, like using those little devices that they have, it's the same thing as just like bending over and fucking touching your toes. When you bend over and touch your toes and your glutes stretch out, and this great sensation just spreads through your body, that is ATP being made from our body. Has evolved to convert the latent energy and gravity on our body into energy, and that's what's happening. When cells elongate, when they're stretched out, this occurs. I don't know the exact mechanism of it, but when it stretches out, that energy is the cell transfers that energy into ATP production. And so when you stretch, like when you bend over and you stretch, and all of that like good feeling that comes out is because those big muscles in your butt are like literally making huge amounts of ATP, and then they're sharing it with all of the relative neighboring tissue. And so yoga and Pilates and other, other activities that do that, like when you're exercising, you're moving your body and stretching, and it's more of the movement and because of the stretching that occurs that's healthy for you than the physical exercise itself. And so Pilates and yoga can be helpful when you don't overdo them because of the stretching nature of those activities. And you can just do that too by just doing like a stretching routine as well. It's the stretching part that's most beneficial for your body. And then when you turn it into an excessive, obsessive practice where you are doing it for hours and hours and just destroying your body, that's where it gets unhealthy and can be harmful for you. So yeah. Often quoted lower. It looks like we're nearing the end of questions. So if you guys want to ask more, because we're going to end soon if when all the questions are ended. Often quoted lower sperm count seem to fail to recommend fructose. Could lower fructose consumption be the root cause? Yeah. Well, actually, so Mike, a lot of people don't know this. So, there's much hullabaloo about fructose and claims that fructose is bad for you. Almost all of the glucose that you consume, carbohydrate, any kind of carbohydrate, including, and our body can make carbohydrate also from protein and fat as well when it has to. All the glucose that you consume is mostly converted into fructose when it enters your cells, actually. So the end fate of most carbohydrate is fructose, even if you're not eating fructose. So it depends, but it is very stressful on the body to only consume like starch and glucose and non-fructose carbohydrate, because our body is dependent on fructose as a metabolic substrate. In like for instance, like I don't remember the exact name, like 6-fructose phosphatase and stuff like that. Those are very, very important fundamental basic pathways in the body. And so consuming dietary fructose takes off some of the pressure of the body having to make fructose from glucose all the time as a major source. And in fact, that was like one of the major early treatments of diabetes, is that diabetics were actually given table sugar to supplement their diet because they were losing so much glucose, and fructose assists the body in utilizing glucose because fructose is the ultimate product that cells need in order to operate. So they can convert glucose into fructose, but that's also very burdensome for the body if you don't have much dietary fructose either, because then it's got to make more fructose out of more glucose. So, and that exhausts those pathways that do convert the glucose into fructose. So having adequate dietary fructose is really important for metabolic health. And yes, sperm quality and testicle function is very dependent on sugar. And it's one of the reasons why, like when you fast or you avoid sugar, your libido drops, is because and we also need protein and calcium and sunlight for proper testicular function. And so if you get a deficiency in any of those, your erectile ability, your libido can drop. And this is the same thing. This is also true for women. The testicles are the same as the ovaries. Reproductive health is highly dependent on fructose. There's fructose in seminal fluid to support sperm. And so like if you're like having fertility issues and you're going through fertility treatments, but you're also like avoiding sugar because you heard it was bad for you, you're giving yourself dysfunctional sperm because you're not eating enough sugar. So yeah, it's not the root cause. There's several root causes, but yeah, it is one of the major ones. So you got into repeat from Matt Stone. Did I experiment with his eat for heat approach? No, I don't really know much about Matt Stone's work at all. People have mentioned him, but no, I don't like, so there's a lot of things that sort of orbit my work that sometimes people will talk about my work being in the same vein, and it's not. There's the term, what is the term, like pro-metabolic, or like bioenergetic. Those terms are just such bullshit. They don't really mean anything. Like a lot of the other people that do use these labels, a lot of their information is total bullshit, and they don't know what they're talking about. And they promote things like that cause nutritive stress on your body. And one of the biggest things is a lot of those people, a lot of them don't know about the pathogenic factors. There's very little focus on pathogens in so there's a very little focus on pathogenic factors in metabolic health in a lot of those people's work, because bacteria are really difficult to understand, and so one of the big differences between their work and mine is the understanding and fixation or orientation toward the microbiological aspect to it. For instance, like a lot of my latest work, and one of the reasons my book update hasn't come out yet, is because I've been like working on parasites too, and there's so fucking many of them. And like if you have metabolic illness, you likely are harboring at least one kind of parasite that's that is catalyzing a lot of these health issues. And then that opens up the secondary bacterial infections, things like Clostridium difficile and H. pylori and stuff like that. And then those cause their own problems. And it's really nuts, and a lot of those people don't know this kind of stuff. So I don't think any of those people know anything that would be useful for me. So I don't consume their work, because a lot of it is just kind of parroting stuff that's already been that's been in circulation for a long time that is not very useful and actually doesn't work. So I don't do that. The Pilates originator said not to do any one move more than 3 times. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. This seems to follow your concern. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, that's really great. I didn't actually know that. That's a really good advice for that. Yeah. Because I mean, the whole problem behind exercise is excess lactic acid production. Our bodies are only like, it's really funny too. I talk about this too, like in terms of evolutionary human history. Anthropologists and scientists will sometimes refer to us as being a distance hunter, and it's so fucking funny because we are not even close to a distance hunter. Like, are you serious? Like, and they say one of the reasons they say that is because like one of the ways in which a lot of predators do hunt is that a lot of animals are not able to run long distances and escape. So predators will pursue them, and the animal will tire very quickly because they don't possess biological resources to be able to maintain prolonged physical exertion. But we aren't like, you know, wild dogs are distance hunters. They can run several marathons in pursuing their prey. Like dogs physiology, like the reason, like I don't know if any of you have heard of the Iditarod, which is a dog sled race that goes for thousands of miles through Canada up to Alaska. The reason they use dogs to pull the sled and not humans is because humans aren't long distance hunters. Human beings cannot do that kind of physical feat. In dogs, for instance, in humans, like we run out of oxygen very quickly and end up producing a lot of lactic acid during extended physical exertion. And that's the same mechanism that kills a lot of animals when they're fleeing predators. But dogs don't do that. Dogs can actually, as long as they have a supply of food, they can exert themselves indefinitely. They can, and that's why they use dogs for the Iditarod. Is because dog physiology is able to switch to consuming like fat as a metabolic resource without inducing metabolic damage to their body. But we are not that way. So when as a human being, when you engage in excessive physical exercise, because of body dysmorphia and poor ideas about your self-worth and and wanting people to like you because they're sexually attracted to you, you end up doing a lot of harm to your body. And then people try to compensate for that harm by using steroids and doing even worse things to their health. And that's why you end up having significant health problems after doing this for several years, because our body is not designed by nature to do that kind of stuff. And people just, because people are insecure, they want they want to imagine ourselves as human beings as some kind of like mythical predator warrior, and it's just so dumb because you don't even need to be that. Like, human evolution is so amazing. We were these cute little like tree dwelling mid-sized primates, you know, with huge hairs, like big piled hair and beards, and you know, and it's really, it is really neat. And then you know, our ancestors were really smart and evolved, like they started fishing for shellfish and stuff in the shallows of ancient Lake Bangachad, and then we, you know, then we lost our hair and stood upright, and then started doing other things because our hands were free. I think it's really cool. One of the reasons we are as intelligent as we are actually too is because human males did not compete for mates the way that most other animals do. If you look at the animal kingdom, we are a very rare exception where most of the animal kingdom males fight with each other for dominance and for mating rights. But human males did not do that. Human males cooperated in reproduction and mating. And that is actually the primary reason why we are the intelligent, technologically advanced species we are today, is because the males in our species were more prone to cooperation. And then that freed us from constant intertribal conflict, even though there still was some of that. Mostly we got freed from that, and then that allowed us to develop culture and art. You know, deer and elephants are too busy fighting each other to make paintings and develop language and stuff like that. So anyway, so you don't need these artificial mythological conceptions of human history to feel good about yourself. You know, just being here is reason enough. And as a species, we're pretty cool. If we weren't murdering all the others and destroying the planet, we'd be really, really awesome. So anyway, okay, last question. There was a joke going around in the 90s that Louisville, Kentucky had so many great musicians. There must be something in the water there. I don't know. A lot of that, you know, well, actually, I mean, water does affect, like the lithium levels in drinking water are shown to reduce depression and violence, or cause depression and violence if it's too low. So literally there really could be stuff in the drinking water in places. Lithium levels, our sources of lithium are mostly from nuts, by the way, everyone that thinks that nuts are bad for you, which I understand why you come to that conclusion. I wondered too, in terms of polyunsaturated fats and stuff like that. If you're avoiding nuts, you're causing yourself to have a lithium deficiency. Nuts are there's no other source. Nuts have generally about twice as much the amount of lithium as the next available source, which are grains and seeds, and then far more than most other plants and even and animal products. Lithium is one of the most important factors for neurological function, and then traditionally lithium also was very common in drinking water, and some places have adequate lithium and others don't. So literally, like, yeah, there really actually could be nutrients in the water that actually benefit your health, or a lack of them that then cause health problems, which is why, you know, that's what I write about in my book, and those kinds of nuances and stuff like that. So anyway, hey guys, happy Friday. This was a fun stream. Thanks for coming by. If you are not subscribed to me, hit subscribe and like, and if you comment too, that helps promote my videos. You can just say, hey, this was great. That kind of stuff helps to promote on the algorithm and things like that. And you can, if you want to be notified earlier before my streams start, go follow me on Twitter, Nathan Guy Hatch there. I'm also on Instagram. It's Nate Hatch, but spelled Natey, or yeah, Nayte, sorry, Nayte Hatch, because the other one was taken, so I just added a letter in there. That's not really how my name is spelled. Oh, thanks, Malind. What else? I'm gonna be having a book update released soon, probably in a month-ish or maybe less, but I don't know. It could be longer. It could actually be longer. I don't really know. My research has to be finished, and I don't know, you can't just like rush that. I've got to learn things, figure out things that, you know, takes lots of trial and error. So it depends on when it's done, but it should probably be done pretty soon. So keep an eye out for that. If you have bought my book and I haven't had a release an update actually in several months, but very often sometimes my emails will go to spam. So check to make sure, you know, that's not the case. Yeah, I redid my cover for the book. If you haven't seen it, you can see it on my website, or the YouTube channel here shows it as well. It's got a little fun pancake on it. Hey Jarvis. Yeah, I know. It is a big book. It's very dense and long, and I really am sorry for that. But you know, there's a lot to put in there, and I'm not the best writer. You know, a lot of it is because of my inexperience as a writer. But I appreciate you guys reading it anyway. And yes, you should finish it. There's a lot of information, and a lot of people don't understand too that like even if you don't think a chapter is relevant to you, I promise it is. All of us have the same biology, and you have to like the whole book is the cure to cancer, and the whole book is the cure for hair loss. The specific chapters just highlight specific issues. So you know, so it's really useful to know all the information that's in there. So yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, hey, thanks guys. Have a good weekend, and I'll try to stream sometime next week. So I will see you later. Bye.